good simple example of how this kind of stuff plays out is seen in the C-stuff pleurobrachial. Pleurobrachial is a feeding machine, including other C-stuff species. As in the water snail, the feeding in pleuroplankton is probably controlled by cells in the buccal ganglia, which can generate a basic feeding pattern in the nerves. And these pattern bursts of action potentials in the nerve activates the buccal musculature to control the whole feeding process. If you take the buccal ganglion out of the animal and put it in a dish with saline, and you stimulate the appropriate nerves, then just the ganglion itself will generate a pattern of bursts in the nerves going out to the muscles that used to go out to the muscles, but no longer go out to the muscles, giving exactly the right pattern of activation of the muscles that you would need to control the feeding mechanism. So it's got a program as to how to feed embedded in its nervous system in the form of how the nerve cells are connected with each other. And that's how its feeding is controlled. Of course, that is simplicity, because all the muscles may contract in the right way in the presence of a food stimulus. So if a chemical is coming from this object and is stimulating the right sensory receptors, it triggers off activity in that feeding circuit, and the pattern of activity is generated. But it's not as simple as that. The animal has to approach the food, has to be in contact with the food in the right way. So there are all kinds of other little things that come into play. But I think you can see that the basic idea is that you build a nervous system that can generate certain pattern of activity when a certain stimulus is present. Okay? And then you use other sensory inputs to modify that basic pattern so that the behavior becomes sensible and useful. The triggering and direction of the feeding activity, the force generated by the muscles, all this will be regulated by other external cues stimulating other sensory receptors that feed into the system and control how the ultimate action is carried out. Now, if you take this animal, pleurobrachial, and you turn it upside down on its back, it triggers off another pattern of activity that activates certain muscles that allow the animal to turn itself over. Okay? So you turn the animal over and you stimulate him with a bit of food. What do you think happens? You now have to decide, what am I going to do? Am I going to turn over or am I going to eat? Well, a pleurobrachial will always eat. So in fact, the animal will stay lying on its back and just eat. On its back until the food is finished, and then it will turn over. So, feeding inhibits the righting reflex. So, you see, this is one of the problems in life. You've got to decide. Living organisms detect, decide, and then do. But you're detecting all kinds of things coming at you. And you can't do everything at the same time. You've got to choose which one is most important for you to do right now. And that's half of life. To assess the scenario around you, and the bigger the brains you have is the more factors you can take into account, and the better the brains you have, I should say. Because it don't have to be big to be better. Although big is good. If you have a good brain, you use it to assess more parameters in your environment. You can make more complicated decisions. You can go for delayed gratification because you know that if I don't do this now, then maybe I'll get more or better later on. Pleurobrachial is not so smart. It has a simple decision to make. Do I eat or do I right myself? It decides, all right, I'm going to eat. So it just stays there and it eats. Okay? All right. What else does pluribacterium do? It mates. Okay? Now, mating is a very tricky thing for pluribacterium. Because remember what I said, it eats slugs. Huh? So it has a really hard decision to decide whether to mate or eat it.
Wow.
But and even more interesting, if animals are mating and you give them food, they will separate and eat. And then when they finish eating, they will go back. So there's obviously something that is